All right. Well, welcome again. Let me add my welcome to all the others that you had, everybody here with us in the room, as well as those of you online. My Bible is open to Luke chapter 15, and so if you have a Bible and want to follow me, we'll just be in one passage today, Luke chapter 15. You can turn there. You might also take the sermon notes, the message notes, if you got those. It's got that passage on it as well. And when we get to each section, the verses will be behind me also. You know, Jesus was an amazing storyteller, as we've been seeing in the series that we are currently in. He had the ability to command the interest of his hearers. He would use real-life characters and real-life situations, but often he would startle his hearers with elements of the story like we're going to see today. And along the way, he would teach them truth about God and his kingdom ways. And so today, we want to look at one of the best, probably one of the best known parables. It's often called the story of the prodigal son, but really this is a story more about the father than it is the sons in this story. You know, the word prodigal means extravagant, reckless, without limits, and certainly that is the way that the younger son lived after receiving the inheritance from his father. But really, it's the father whose love is on display and whose love is extravagant and reckless and without limits. And God is represented by the Father in this story. And so I like to call this the story of the Prodigal God. So Jesus says to the crowd that's there listening to him that here's a story about a dad who does the unthinkable. And you know what? God is like that. And so, if you have the passage there, we're going to start in verse 11. Let's look at Luke chapter 15. It says, Jesus continued, "There was a man who had 2 sons. And the younger one said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' And so he divided his property between them." The younger son here does an unthinkable thing. You know, it was an honor-based culture. And so he shows extreme dishonor to his father here. In essence, he says, you know what? All I really care about is your money. And truth be told, I'm tired of waiting around for you to die. What I'd really like you to do is to give me my share now. And so the father does an even more unthinkable thing, and he gives him his inheritance. You see, the father recognized the foolish thinking of his younger son. His younger son believed that it was money and pleasure and wild living that would bring happiness. Proverbs 22:15 says it's a parent's job to drive foolish thinking away from our children's hearts. And so what this father does is he does an unimaginable thing here, I believe, to drive the foolish thinking away from his son's heart. And so what he does is he gives this son, this youngest son, a third of his wealth. That would have been his inheritance. The brother and he would have gotten shares, and then the older brother would have gotten double shares for being the eldest. So he takes a third of his wealth and he gives it to his son, knowing that he's just going to squander it. And that's exactly what he does. Keep following with me in the story, verse 13. It says, "Not long after that, the younger son got together all that he had, and he set off for a distant country, and there he squandered his wealth in wild living. And after he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country, and he began to be in need. And so he went and he hired himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him to his field to feed pigs. And he longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating. But no one gave him anything. You see, in his search for happiness, this son exhausts all that he has. And then he experiences the natural results of his foolish thinking. Not fulfillment and happiness, but rather emptiness and unhappiness and want and hunger. And it's impossible for us as 21st century Westerners to understand the gasp factor that would have been here for these first century listeners of Jesus. That he got a job feeding untouchable pigs. And not only to have the disgrace and the dishonor of feeding pigs, but to even be envious of them. Because they at least had something to eat and he was starving. And so, the story goes on, verse 17, that when he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? And here I am starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' And so he got up and he went to his father." You see, the natural consequences of his behavior has impacted this son's thinking. That's what natural consequences do. They adjust our thinking. But see, what happens here for this son is instead of switching to right thinking, which would have been that happiness comes as a result of being the loved, obedient son of my father. Instead of switching to right thinking, he switches from one foolish set of ideas to another set of foolish ideas. See, he thinks, well, I bet I can go back and I can work and I can earn my father's love. And so he starts the journey home, and then there at the end of verse 20 is the big plot shift. He's coming home, and at the end of verse 20 it says, "But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. And he ran to his son, and he threw his arms around him, and he kissed him." You see, the father's response isn't condemnation, isn't, "Well, I told you so," but rather it's compassion and this extravagant outpouring of love. And I don't want you to miss this right there in the verse. Don't miss that the father is there looking for his son to return. See, he didn't simply give his son the money and then wash his hands of him. No, he knew that his son's foolish thinking would lead to ruin. And so there he is looking, longing for his son to come home. And verse 21 says that the son said to him, "Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son." But the father said to his servants, "Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger." That's the symbol of family, of sonship. "Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead, and he's alive again. He was lost and is found." And so they began to celebrate. See, the son starts his plea bargain for acceptance, but the father wouldn't hear any of it. Because you see, the son doesn't need to work for his acceptance. He already has it. The son can't perform for his love. He already is loved. Now, there's a key part here that I purposely left out back at the end of verse 20 that I for sure don't want you to miss. The end of verse 20, it says, let me read that part again. "But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him, and he was filled with compassion, and he ran." Circle that word. He ran to his son. You see, in this culture, old men didn't run. It's kind of like in our culture, white men can't jump, right? But old men didn't run. It was considered undignified for someone, an older man, to run, and especially to run after a son like this who had shown you such great dishonor. But you see, none of that mattered to this father. And again, remember, this father represents God in the story. His son, who was lost, was coming home. And he didn't wait for him with a scowl on his face and with his arms folded. No, when he saw him coming, he ran to greet him. He couldn't wait to embrace him and welcome him back. One of my favorite songs of years gone by is a song that Benny Hester wrote and sang called "When God Ran." The lyrics go like this for part of the chorus. He says, "Almighty God, the great I am, immovable rock, omnipotent, powerful, awesome Lord, victorious warrior, commanding King of kings, mighty conqueror." And the only time I ever saw him run was when he ran to me. And he took me in his arms, and he held my head to his chest, and he said, "My son's come home again." He looked in my face, and he wiped the tears from my eyes, and with forgiveness in his voice, he said, "Son, do you know I still love you?" And it caught me by surprise when God ran. I don't know where you are this morning in terms of your relationship with God. But what this story shouts at me is that God isn't waiting for you with his arms crossed and a scowl on his face. Never. That no matter what you've done, he's standing at the horizon. He's looking for you. And when he sees you coming, he will run to welcome you back. Well, I've asked Jerry to come and to sing us that song. And as he does, just contemplate God's great love for you.
God, the great I am, immovable rock, omnipotent, powerful, awesome Lord, victorious warrior, commanding King of kings, mighty conqueror, and the only time, the only time I ever saw him run was when he ran to me, took me in his arms, held my head to his chest, said, "My son's come home again," lifted my face, wiped the tears from my eyes, with forgiveness in his voice. He said, "Son, do you know I still love you?" And he caught me by surprise when God ran. The day I left home, I knew I'd broken his heart, and I wondered then if things would ever be the same. Then one night I remembered his love for me, and down that dusty road ahead I could see it was the only time. It was the only time I ever saw him run, was when he ran to me, took me in his arms, held my head to his chest, said, "My son's come home again," lifted my face, wiped the tears from my eyes, with forgiveness in his voice. He said, "Son, do you know I still love you?" Then he caught me by surprise when God ran. I saw him run to me, and then I ran to him. I was so ashamed, all alone and so far away, but now I know he's been waiting for this day. He ran to me, and then he ran to me, took me in his arms, held my head to his chest, said, "My son's come home again," lifted my face, wiped the tears from my eyes, with forgiveness in his voice. I felt his love call me again. He ran to me, he took me in his arms, held my head to his chest, said, "My son's come home again," lifted my face, wiped the tears from my eyes, with forgiveness in his voice. He said, "Son," he said, "Son," he said, "Son, do you know I still love you?" And he ran to me, then God ran.
It caught me by surprise when God ran. We've got a God who runs to us. Well, the story's not quite done, and so I don't want to rob you of this last part either. It says, verse 25, that meanwhile, the older son was in the field. There's two lost sons in this story, you see. The older son was in the field, and when he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. And so he called one of the servants, and he asked him what was going on. And the brother has come home, he replied, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound. And the older brother became angry, and he refused to go in. And so his father went out to him, and he pleaded with him. But he answered his father, "Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. And yet you never gave me even a young goat so that I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him." "My son," the father said, "you're always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead, and he's alive again. He was lost, and he's now found." You see, what this last part of the story shows us is that there's more than one way to miss the heart of God, isn't there? Some of us are lost because we're running away from God's love, while others of us are lost because we're busy trying to earn God's love. But you see, friends, we can't work for God's acceptance because we already have it. We can't perform for his love because we already are loved. It's just a matter of whether or not we'll accept it. And so I want to tell you this morning, if you're working hard to get God's favor, then you have missed grace. You see, it's all grace. Crazy, ridiculous, extravagant, undeserved, reckless, limitless grace. That's the kind of God we have. And so what we're going to do here as we bring things to a close is we're going to stand together and sing and worship and celebrate that God right now. And while we're doing it, I just want to tell you, if you don't know him, you can change that right now. If you've been running away from him, then there's no better time than right now. Whether you're sitting here in this room or at home or wherever you are, there's no better time than right now to reverse course. And if you do, I can promise you, he's already waiting. But by the same token, if you've been smug and self-righteous, thinking how lucky God is to have you or someone like you, listen, you can repent of that right now as well. And you can come and embrace God's amazing grace and love for you. You can grab hold of the acceptance that's already yours, the love that's already yours, if you'll just take it. And so, what I'd like us to do in these last couple songs is just to sing together and celebrate what a God we have. And while we're doing that, if you have business to do with God, then do it. Talk to God right now. If you'd like somebody to pray with you as you do that, we'll have prayer team people up here. While we're singing, they would love to pray with you and help you. But let's stand together. Would you? Let's be standing. And let's sing and let's celebrate what a God we have.